That's Justice Minister Arif Virani today after tabling a marquee piece of legislation for his government that aims to stop the bad stuff happening online. The bill more specifically aims to target the non-consensual sharing of intimate images and violent content and would change the criminal code to increase sentences for spreading hate online. The act would also require online platforms like Meta to disclose and reduce harmful content. How feasible, though, is that? One person who knows about the powers and responsibilities of social media platforms is Frances Haugen. Haugen is a former product manager at Facebook and has been an advocate for social media accountability after she blew the whistle on the platform. Back in 2021, Haugen released documents to the Washington Post that exposed how much Facebook knew about the harms it was causing. She has also testified to U.S. Congress about Facebook's impact on young users, and Frances Haugen is with me now. Hi, Ms. Haugen. Good to meet you and great to have you on our program tonight.
Happy to be here.
When you first blew the whistle on Facebook, one of the areas you flagged was kids' mental health, children's mental health. What stuff stood out to you in that realm while you were there?
What's so surprising about the difference between what Facebook said publicly up to very, very recently and what was actually being said privately was that Facebook's employees knew that they were harming kids and they were underinvesting in what was necessary to actually keep kids safe. One of the big things that came out in the form of the attorneys general in the United States suing Meta over children's safety was that repeatedly executives inside the company said, we are not staffing enough people, we're not investing enough money. Very small amounts were needed to make kids safe. And yet because there's no accountability for these companies today, they chose not to invest $10 million, $20 million, while taking home $45 million in profit, $1 billion in profit.
Would it be fair to characterize that company specifically, but more widely, that platforms as aware of the harms that were, like, very hyper aware to the harms that kids were incurring?
You know, it's interesting. We can look at the actions of other platforms like Snapchat or even TikTok and see that each company right now is kind of taking different cues on how much to emphasize the safety of children. For example, Snapchat was found to be able to take down exploitative images of children in minutes, while other platforms take hours or days. So right now, we know that the platforms know this is a problem, but different platforms are taking different levels of effort to try to deal with this. And that's why we need laws like a Canadian online safety bill to make sure that Canadian researchers can ask questions about, is the platform your kid is spending time on doing everything they can to make sure that kid is safe?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you think that there is a legislative solution to the problem.
Certainly. So part of how we got here is that we are moving into something that I sometimes call the intangible economy. That if you were to buy a car, if you had mechanical skills, you could take that car apart and crash test it and examine the tires, see if they were reliable. When we're dealing with products that run on our phones, if we don't have legal rights to get basic data on those products or legal mandate like the online safety bill around having a duty of care for kids, those platforms can do whatever they want and they know we'll never know the truth for sure. One of the big things that a number of different activist groups came out with after I came forward with my disclosures was for years they had been talking about online bullying, eating disorders, mental health issues for kids. And over again, the platform said, there's no harm here. That's not a representative experience. Yet the internal documents showed that 1 in 5 kids was really struggling on Meta's products. I don't have the numbers for the other platforms. But right now, without a legislative right to know, we don't know whether or not we're dealing with marketing messages or actual explanations for the safety of these products.
Is transparency the key ingredient potentially for legislation to be successful? And by that, I mean like forcing transparency on these companies?
If we don't force transparency, if we don't have a legal right to know, we will not get any real data out. Because remember, when these platforms actually open the curtains and let us see what the stakes are, we're going to demand more investments in trust and safety. And the second part that I'm really excited about how Canada is approaching this issue is it's less a bill that says you must take down every last dangerous thing. And it's a bill that says, if you know there are risks, you have to tell us. You can't lie about it. And you need to tell us what your plan is for mitigating those risks, reducing those risks. And you need to give us enough information that we know you're making progress. That's a sensible, moderate approach. It's not about fear mongering. It's not about censoring people. It's about making sure we can balance the profit motive with the safety of our families, the safety of our communities.
Do you think the internal calculation at these companies has changed since you first brought all this stuff to light in 2021? And I guess my question is informed by the nature of the discussion so publicly, the fact that you have testified in multiple legislatures around the world. Like, we have a heightened awareness of what is going on. Does that change their willingness to work with legislation like this, for example, or legislation that exists elsewhere?
So just a few weeks ago, there was a major Senate hearing about child safety in the United States. And one of the senators openly made fun of the CEOs gathered in front of him, listing off the features that Meta, that TikTok, that Snapchat had pushed out the door in just the few weeks before the hearing, because there were really sensible things that weren't happening. They were actively promoting eating disorder content to kids who expressed maybe interest in healthy eating. There were issues around promoting content around self-harm. We've seen that these platforms don't invest in safety based on need, based on the actual risks that need to be accounted for. They invest based on fear of consequences. And one of the things that these companies are now seeing, now that Europe has acted in the form of the Digital Services Act, the UK has acted in the form of the Online Safety Bill, the fact that I think Canada has one of the best bills that's been proposed to date, they're seeing that the tide is turning. And so, you can't ignore it anymore. You have to work with the public. And so I hope that Canada takes a step forward, because Canada can help organize other countries that might otherwise not be able to put together such an effective piece of legislation to pass similar laws in their own countries. And that's how we'll really get an equitable, linguistically diverse, safe online ecosystem of social media platforms. Do
you think public pressure, absent legislation, would work?
That's such a great question. So I'm a big proponent because, I'm in the US. We have trouble passing laws. One day, who knows, maybe we'll grow up a little bit. In the United States, we're much more reliant on other mechanisms of social pressure. That's things like advertiser boycotts, divestment campaigns, maybe class action litigations. But all of these things need data, they need information, they need transparency for the fuel to measure whether or not progress is made. So I'll give you an example. There's only been one successful advertiser boycott around social media to date. It's called Stop Hate for Profit. It happened in 2020 when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening. Because outside forces couldn't assess the progress the platforms made, they had to take the platform's word. And the platforms came back about a month later and said, we fixed hate speech. Here's everything we took down. That's not a systematic way of looking at why was the platform promoting hate speech? What would have been the ways of mitigating those risks over time? That's just, censoring a few accounts. We need to have a legal right to know. We need a right to know what's happening. We need a right to know what gets taken down. We need a right to know whether or not they're doing enough to keep us safe. And that's what I'm hoping we'll see Canada lead the way on.
Do you, my final question to you, Ms. Haugen, is around the timing of this. I mean, you had mentioned some other jurisdictions that are pursuing a legislative solution as well. Is it still coming in time to have a measurable impact on the societal harms that these platforms can inflict? And I ask, as a parent, I'm sure so many parents, it feels as though we're years behind where things are. Is it still possible to have a measurable impact, do you think?
Well, it's like I always say, every year more kids turn 13 and can officially come on Instagram. Every year, we have kids get impacted more and more. Every year we have adults get impacted more and more. The same problems with algorithms pushing people towards more extreme content. That phenomena exists across all age ranges. We always have time. We still have time to act. Things can get much, much worse than they already are. But focusing on things that focus on risk and systematically designing these platforms to be safer, that's a solution that lets us build towards a future where we can have social media we feel good about.
I'm going to leave it on that note. Ms. Haugen, thank you so much for your time and your analysis this evening.
Have a great night.
You too. That is the original Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen. We did reach out to both Google and Meta for an interview to discuss the tabled legislation. Nobody at either company was available, but Meta did provide us with a statement that reads, "We support the federal government's goal of helping young people have safe, positive experiences online and have spent more than a decade developing industry-leading tools and policies to protect them. We look forward to collaborating with lawmakers and industry peers on our long-standing priority to keep Canadians safe."